It seems like the left-wing debate bros have won. I can't be the only one that saw Charlie Kirk get blown out on that point. Jordan Peterson get blown out on that point and realize the end is nigh for the conservative grifter. It's over. Because everybody that has put these people up on a pedestal, Peterson and Charlie Kirk have all the answers. If I hear a left-wing argument, I go to Charlie Kirk and Peterson to hear why that's not true. They've got all the answers. They're the masters of knowledge. Their weakness in both cases is their hypocrisy. And that's where a liberal can pull at that string and unravel the entire grift. You say you're America first, but you support this genocide in Gaza and our aircraft carriers and foreign aid and all that over there. You're a traitor. You're corrupt. You've sold out our country to the highest bidder, and history will remember it that way. You've got nothing. You've got nothing. If the young, energetic, thoughtful young people that are going viral and blowing up on TikTok, if they're on the other side, if they're on the left, that spells a lot of trouble for the right wing and all their casuals, vaguely conservative people that, they want to show up to the Charlie Kirk thing and get their signed MAGA hat or something. It spells the end for them. If Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and Charlie Kirk can't annihilate the SJWs anymore, then what can they do? Because you have to consider that these conservatives, they do these intramural debates for a living. They do this professionally. Jordan Peterson is, I think, in his 60s or 70s. He has a PhD. He's a university professor with decades of experience with the clinical practice. He's a psychologist. And he's debating 20 liberal kids. And when you're in a room with 20 liberal debate bros, 20 liberal semantic pedants who are going to get you on every little thing, that they're masters of the gotcha, there's nowhere to run. You're in a fluorescently lit warehouse with 20 liberal debate bros, and your entire life is about to be hydraulic pressed by facts and logic, and you can't fucking cry either. You can't cry your way out of this one. This isn't Piers Morgan.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing, right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
Jordan Peterson being exposed as a charlatan by 20 atheists on Jubilee is not embarrassing as a Christian pastor because of the atheism of it all. They actually had well-educated arguments and really wanted a well-informed discussion. It's embarrassing because Jordan Peterson is being exposed as just another charlatan trying to use Christianity to gain relevance, to gain content, to gain clicks, to gain authority. But the reality is he is so intellectually insecure that when people actually bring well-educated arguments to him and actually push him to defend the things that he believes, he retreats to this semantic place where he doesn't actually believe anything, which shows how weak and insecure he really is intellectually and goes against everything he says about how masculinity means to be strong and means to stand up for your point. But he is unable to defend or to stand up for any of the positions that he actually believes in. And it's so frustrating to see so many Christian content creators try to gain a voice, try to gain relevance without actually sharing the things that Jesus wanted us to share. Jesus didn't care about gay people. He didn't say one thing about gay people. Jesus doesn't say anything about abortion. Jesus wants us to love the people who are our enemies, and he wants us to care about poor people and immigrants. And if you care more about the former than you do the latter, you are just like Jordan Peterson and do not care about what Christianity actually represents. You only want the power, the authority, the relevance that comes with Christianity. You don't actually want to be a disciple of Christ who calls us to love our neighbor, to let people who stole from you keep it and you can't even ask for it back. I'm so sick of pretending these Christian content creators who just want more views, more clicks, more followers, instead of pointing them to Jesus, who who actually just wants us to love one another, to care about one another. And so I'm so glad that these atheists did expose Jordan Peterson for the charlatan he is, because he doesn't believe in anything. During his debate at Cambridge, Charlie Kirk brought up Matthew 19 in response to a question from a student about homosexuality, and he claims that Jesus reaffirms the biblical marriage is between one man and one woman. The only problem with that is in Matthew 19, Jesus is talking about divorce. Jesus was asked by the Pharisees if divorce was lawful or not, and Jesus says no, that anyone who divorces his wife commits adultery, which is funny because I have heard Charlie Kirk condemn gay people plenty, but I've never heard him once condemn Donald Trump, who according to him and Jesus is actively living in sin and committing adultery on his third divorce. So even if Trump was saved, he is still actively living in sin. Jesus condemns divorce because in a perfect world, no woman would need to get married to a man that would abuse her. And Jesus wants us to live in the perfect world, in the kingdom of God, where men can't and won't abuse women. Biblical marriage just meant you can marry as many wives as you could afford. But I also wish Charlie Kirk kept reading Matthew 19, because in that same chapter, Jesus affirms non-binary people as members of the kingdom, and even welcomes people who have gender-affirming surgery to the kingdom. It's also the same chapter where a rich man runs up to Jesus and asks, how do I get into heaven? And Jesus says, go and sell everything you own, and then tells its disciples it's impossible for a rich man to get into heaven. I just wish Charlie Kirk actually read the Bible that he uses to spread hate, and I know he gets paid to spread this misinformation, and he doesn't care when he's wrong. But using the Bible as a cudgel to hate others instead of a lens to love others is so far from what Jesus actually wanted.
Charlie Kirk debating those Cambridge students was one of the best things ever, because it kind of shows us that things are not that black and white. Like, Charlie Kirk is a pretty strong advocate for thinking in a very black and white way about everything, like an objective morality, hard right, hard wrong, with like lots of different issues and stuff. And I think that we just saw firsthand how that's just not the case.
Women with kids are not the ones tearing down statues, right? They're the ones that actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware of?
Again, it's a little bit of a one-liner.
Come on, you can do it.
All right, bro, I can't do it. Here.
All right, appreciate it.
I can't grip the fucker. Like, I gotta have a way to grip it.
Chug? I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and killing children that have been abused.
That's not the point. What I'm saying.
There is a direct line connecting Charlie Kirk getting absolutely demolished by Cambridge students and the Trump administration defunding and attacking Harvard University, because education is a threat to the aristocracy, because education provides class mobility for the lower classes and allows them access to power, to privilege, to authority, and to capital. Things that they never had before, things that Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk are trying to prevent. Charlie Kirk says that he wants Western values to be part of society, but he is betrayed when he actually debates the bastion and champions of Western values in Cambridge students, who run circles around him because he's not even disciplined enough to get a degree from a Western institution. But he thinks that he's a champion of Western ideas, while he belittles women, while he tries to prevent them from gaining access to workplaces, to healthcare. He's a self-purported Christian nationalist who betrays the words of Christ with his belief of America first. There is a reason that Donald Trump, that all of these most wealthy elites will always send their children to universities like Harvard, Yale, like that's where I got my degree, or NYU. It's because they understand that education is access to power, to privilege, to capital. This is how the rich continue to stay rich, by sending their children to Ivy League schools, making it harder for you to get your child into an Ivy League university, and lying to your face and saying that you should not allow your daughter to work, you should not allow your daughter to get an education, because people like Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump are the real degradation of Western society, because they are preventing everybody from experiencing the freedom that our founding fathers actually wanted to fight for.
Can I ask you, who's the main funder of Hamas?
Well, the Palestine...
State?
Well, the West actually funds Hamas.
No, which state?
Well, Iran funds...
No.
Also,
where are the Hamas leaders?
And also Qatar funds Hamas.
Yes.
It is a combination of international relief organizations.
Is this a state we should have a $400 million jet with the President of the United States on it?
Hold on.
Opinion is on abortion.
Life begins at conception.
But about abortion specifically, why do you think abortion's wrong specifically?
Well, you agree murder is wrong?
I agree. Okay, so this is where we get to the question, right? Because what is it about murder you say is wrong? Like, why is murder wrong?
Well, because it's a human being, not just because it has consciousness or because it's of a certain age, because it's a human.
And what is it that gives human being this moral worth?
Not its consciousness necessarily.
I didn't say it's consciousness.
I know, I can imagine it because it is a human being, because that has a soul.
And what is this soul? Where does this come from? This idea that it's...
Exactly. I mean, again, the Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being. Okay, you guys can laugh. I mean, it's true. I mean, every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West and what the birth certificate of my country articulates, is that every human being is more than just matter, it's more than just a clump of cells, but it also has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
Fine, so, I mean, can you say that comes from the Bible, or where else do you get that from?
Ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West. And again, the Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times. The founders were explicitly believed not in a secular morality, but a divinely given one, of at least this idea that there is a God and you are not him. And let me ask you, what is the first stage of human development?
So this is the thing, right? We can take it from the sperm being generated in the father and the oocyte being generated in the mother, right? They fuse at birth, conception, sorry. The only thing that happens at conception is these 2 cells fuse, right?
No, DNA is created. A zygote.
DNA is not created.
A DNA, no, that's not true. The DNA,
Charlie,
DNA coding at the zygote. Hold on, time out.
I'll let you finish.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Charlie, DNA...
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
You have to let me speak. You have to...
But answer it, yes or no. Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Define a unique marker.
Meaning, can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote if you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis? Can you?
Only purely because the addition comes from the father.
Oh, so it is something different.
Charlie, DNA is not created. DNA is not created. You have, the father has his own genome, the mother has her own genome. They fuse. This is why you have the same characteristics, similar ones to your mother, similar ones to your father. That's why you have similar characteristics to your siblings. DNA is not created, right? So when you ask me, where does a human being come from? I can say to you, it starts at conception, but all conception is these 2 cells joining, right? But these 2 cells were created, the mother cells were created long before, they were created when she was a fetus. So there's none of this DNA being produced, right? So we can't establish, the only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason, suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these 2 cells who had half the DNA. But suddenly there's a
correct. Yeah, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
Charlie, I promise you, I'm not trying to score points. I'm not trying to score points on you. This is genuinely...
We call it the miracle of life for a reason. We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
We call it the miracle of life because, yes, it's something beautiful, the ability to form a new...
Magical.
It's not... You say magical as in, oh, it's beautiful, it's an incredible thing that happens, of course. But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
Hold on, but time out. Isn't there a separate DNA, though, than the mother?
Yes, from the father.
Okay, yes, but it's not the father's DNA either. A new coding is created.
Charlie,
you are a blend of the 2. And so when did your life begin?
Okay, so
when did your life begin?
I mean, again, this comes from what you define as where life starts. You can say life starts at conception, but I'm telling you, I believe that's just an arbitrary point, right? That's just the moment these 2 cells fuse. Now, you say about this mother thing. So the way DNA is arranged in a cell is it's arranged in chromosomes. Chromosomes are paired up, so you have one from the mother, one from the father, typically, in a healthy individual, right? Now, you can take those maternal chromosomes out and you can find that this is who the person's mother is, and you can do the same with the father. Now, the reason you are different to your mother and father is because some of those chromosomes express genes that are different from each other, and so those genes interact, and that's what gives rise to you, right? But there's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering. But if you take that out of the equation, the fact that these two DNA, whatever they call molecules, right? These two DNA molecules are fusing, that does not suddenly flip a switch that attributes moral worth to that individual. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to score points.
Right, then, by what moral standard do you believe that?
If an individual is capable of suffering, then it's wrong. Now, can I explain my opinion on abortion, just so you can understand? I would agree, as many reasonable people would, that at 9 months, it's unreasonable to expect someone to get an abortion, right? Unless you have some extreme circumstances. But for an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me. But it also seems radical to say that a woman who has just, the cells have just fused, to deny her of an abortion also seems wrong to me. Because that zygote is not capable of suffering, as far as we know.
So by what moral standard? Is that just your opinion? Where did you get that moral standard from?
Because suffering is a bad thing. We all know suffering is a bad thing. That's an objective fact, right?
Well, hold on. So you do believe in objective morality?
I believe that suffering is an objectively negative
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
What do you mean if you can't?
You can't feel the pain, is it okay to inflict the pain?
In the sense that if no one's suffering from it, if you have a scenario where nobody is suffering from something, then yes, of course. Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
So let me just make sure I understand this correctly. That if it doesn't affect their well-being, so dementia patients that don't know who they are or where they're from, can we execute dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
Can you imagine a scenario?
Or Alzheimer's patients.
Charlie,
Alzheimer's patients don't really know much about anything. Can we schedule them for execution because they can't technically suffer?
Now respond. So can you imagine a scenario where we lived in a society where we killed people when they suffered from dementia, were incapable of suffering, and we killed them, right? It's not a scenario that involves an absence of suffering. There's still suffering involved. Imagine you grow up thinking, my dad could be killed at any moment because he's going to get dementia. Imagine living your life thinking, I could get dementia and suddenly I'd be killed by my state.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
Charlie, it's not slaughter, that's the problem.
Well, hold on, if it's a forcible removal from the umbilical cord of another human life, again, we have clarity but not agreement. Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception. Your coding,
your
uniqueness.
That's what I'm denying. I disagree with that.
Okay, when those two cells fused together, to use your terminology,
yes,
that is where the process of
scientifically accepted terminology.
In the interest of time, can we bring this question to a close?
The process of human development objectively begins at that moment. Therefore, those human beings are deserving of human rights. His suggested budget cuts $1.5 trillion. I wish it should be even more.
That is not true.
No, it is. It's okay. You could look it up.
$1.5 trillion would be the equivalent of cutting the entire American military budget and a half.
He's advocating for raising taxes on the ultra wealthy. We'll see if that materializes.
That is an income tax. The ultra wealthy generally do not take a large portion of their income from an income tax and take it instead from capital gains.
Well,
fundamentally, increasing an 8% tax on Elon Musk, who takes like $10,000 as a salary or something stupid, will not make any material difference. This is a straw man argument, and it is obfuscating from the fundamental issue is the government for and run by oligarchs.
So I'm a feminist. My question is about the role of women, though. What should women's role in public and private life look like, and what are the material benefits of that?
Well, thank you for that. Can I take it? I don't really want to take this detour, but can we both agree on what a woman is?
Yes. An adult human female is a biological state of being that is also socially experienced. Can I please elucidate just one example of that social experience?
Yeah, I was going to answer your question, but sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So let's say you're a member of a tribe, and in that tribe, you have the biological female anatomy, and in order to become a woman in that tribe, you have to also get a tattoo. That's a social experience that's mapped onto biological reality.
So can a woman have a prostate?
Can a woman have a prostate? Biologically speaking, a woman is an adult human female that has a biological reality, but it's also social experience, right? So I don't...
It's super easy. Like, can a woman have a prostate?
So as per my definition of woman, I would say that people who have a prostate are biologically male, but they can sometimes be socially treated as women.
Okay, got it. So women can have prostates. Got it. Okay. So you're a feminist that actually isn't just fighting for women, you're also fighting for men.
So, yes, men also experience harms from patriarchy, but I argue...
We're talking about the same feminism, though, just make sure. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, men also experience harm from patriarchal domination, but I would argue that those harms come from that system of domination itself. In the same way, for example, this isn't a threat, but if I reached across and punched you in the face, then my hand might hurt. Right? So, are we understanding that there are, patterns of power? So, I would also fight for the rights of men as a feminist, just as I would fight for the rights of women.
Sure. You think women are happier than they were 40 years ago?
I think I would have a few responses to that. I think that women report more stress and dissatisfaction today because, not because they have more rights or because of feminism, but because they're under dual pressure to both excel professionally and also because of the domestic labor in homes that is structured around outdated expectations. So, for example, studies like the OECD's Better Life Index show that women's life expectancy, education levels, professional achievements have risen in countries with higher gender inequality. So I would argue that what you're calling unhappiness is actually visibility, because now we hear women expressing dissatisfaction, whereas in the 50s, we prescribed them Valium and we lobotomized.
Yeah. That's really rich. I didn't know women not to complain 50 years ago. That's funny. Hold on a second. Why are suicide rates going up more for women?
I think that encourages...
They're not complaining. Materially, women are killing themselves more. Why is that?
I think that even if both men and women have become unhappier, men's suicide rates have risen as well, and that's also been exponential. Can you at least concede that feminism offers only one potential explanation? There could be also other explanations.
Of course, obviously, but feminism is the glaring thing in front of us, where we have fertility rates down, we have marriage rates down, we have unhappiness up, and we did something in the 1960s out of the universities of Brady Friedan and Gloria Steinem and all these feminists that basically said, you're trapped in a home, go get a job, freeze your eggs, take birth control, and all of a sudden women are way unhappier than they were 40 years ago. I just have to ask the question, why is that? Is it working? And maybe there are biological differences between men and women that we should respect, and that deep down a lot of women want to get married and have children. In fact, we should applaud it, and we should support it, and we should say it means nothing if you're going to go be a CEO of some shoe company or be some banker in London. What matters if you raise children and you have something to pass down long after you're gone.
I think I would bring 2 points to that. The first one is just really simple, which is that you can ascribe liberalism all you want as the cause of the unhappiness. I would argue something else. I would say that it's certain economic policy that has very little to do with the social acceptance of alternative lifestyles. I would say that we can recognize that income inequality across a vast swathe of Western countries has increased, which causes all kinds of social ills, a lack of social cohesion, housing price growth doesn't correspond with wage growth, monopolies increasingly become kind of emboldened to interfere with politics, and monopolies don't prioritize social health either. I think that those offer more compelling reasons for a decline in happiness than an increase in freedoms, because just one more thing, on an intuitive basis, generally speaking, people want more freedom, not less.
Okay, so if that's true, why is it, do you agree that the happiest women of the West are married with kids?
I would have to look into it, but I think there are certain
and objectively we know that, right? The women with kids are not the ones tearing down statues, right? They're the ones that actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware of?
Again, it's a little bit of a one-liner. The happy and the grateful. The happy and the grateful usually don't go burn down Wendy's in their spare time, of which we saw in our country all throughout a single summer. But as a side note, you would agree, objectively, study after study, survey after survey, that the women of the West that are married and have children, especially a lot of children, are far happier than even the ones that earn more money correlated at the same age.
So I also don't think that happiness is a very good metric, and neither do you, because you think gay people shouldn't just pursue happiness by being gay. They have other moralistic considerations to be making. So I don't think smiles per capita is a particularly convincing way to measure whether or not we should encourage women to be autonomous. I think we should maximize agency within a fair system that has reasonable parameters, because it's expedient, it's good for the economy, it's logical, it's a moral thing, because if we can't prove the material harms, we shouldn't discourage it. And also, self-reported studies is a really flawed way to do psychology. It's the week before my university exams right now, and I'm standing here explaining the basic methodology behind survey collection in sociology, which you don't even think is a real subject, to Charlie Kirk. If I took one of those surveys right now, I'd check extremely miserable. But so would a Palestinian child who's been torn to smithereens. How are we going to measure...
You would say extremely miserable?
No, I'm kind of making a joke.
No, I mean, but seriously, but hold on. I mean, that's an important point, though, is that the women of the West have it the best in the world, and yet they're way unhappier than women of sub-Saharan Africa. There's something fundamentally wrong here. Because the women of sub-Saharan Africa have something that a lot of women in the West do not have. The women in the West have cats and they have good jobs. And the women of sub-Saharan Africa, they have a belief in the divine and they have kids. And maybe there's a biological undercurrent that is keeping a lot of women from realizing their full potential. And so without reading your phone and just like, connecting.
I'm not really reading my phone.
Well, it's fine, for sure. Then you can answer without it. Fair enough. Would you agree that it's a good thing that more women get married and have children in the West?
I would ask you, would you say that a sub-Saharan African woman who's experienced female genital mutilation and checks extremely happy in a survey, and I also would check extremely happy in a survey, who do you think would be objectively more happy, even if they both check the same answer?
No, again, so I fully, if you want to talk about how Islam mistreats women, we could talk all day long. Like, I'm all for that.
Me too.
Okay, good. So we agree.
Absolutely. We agree on many things.
And we should shut off Muslim immigration to the UK, right? We totally agree.
I think that all religious fundamentalism is bad, and if you take that logic, we should also not allow evangelical Christians to
okay. Hold on a second. Can you show me what would your example, because I had 50, a single Christian country that you would say mistreats women, right?
America.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We had a female woman vice president. We had a female vice president, a female speaker of the House. Women earn more than men in America.
In Rwanda, female representation in government supersedes the UK by quite a lot. Do women get treated better in Rwanda?
Okay, I might be super off this. Like, is Rwanda Islamic? Like, I'm not totally sure. I don't think it is. Like, is it? Like, I don't know, actually. It's not. So, again, we were just talking about Islam. It's a little bit of a side note. But you must be morally clear, because you brought up female genital mutilation, which is a teaching of the Islamic faith. But as a side note, like, again, this is very important, which is, I'm not here to require you to do anything or not. I'm making a simple observation, which is objectively true regardless. The women of the West are miserable, and they're miserable for a reason, because we've told them to suppress how they are made by God and pursue something else and get a bunch of trinkets and get a bunch of promotions, and they end up at 38 years old with a big flat in London, and they're miserable. We should tell them to stop freezing their eggs and start finding their partner earlier and have lots of babies.
Yeah, okay, I think I'll bring two just final points to this. First one is just really intuitive, right, which is that if you actually care about women's happiness, then the solution is to structurally support them. That means universal childcare, shared legally enforceable parental leave, and in Nordic countries where women have high workforce participation and also some state support, they report higher life satisfaction than in more conservative countries, including America. So if your metric is happiness,
just do satisfaction surveys. You told me they're BS.
So are satisfaction surveys bullshit or not? Because you told me they're bullshit.
Do you acknowledge satisfaction surveys or not? You just told me that they're BS. Do you think they're objective? We can use that as data?
I don't think that
yes or no?
is the only sole data set, but it is the data set that
you told me they're so flawed and you self-report. Okay, by the macro self-satisfaction data, I am correct. And you are right. When you have paid family leave, you are happier. I'm actually a proponent of that. At Turning Point USA, we pay for 6 months when somebody has a child. I think there's a lot of agreement we can have on that. We need to encourage having more children. I think the Hungarian child policy is phenomenal. We should look at that, because the greatest thing that is plaguing the West is we're not having enough kids. And it's not just bad because we won't have a future. It's also bad because the present is awfully miserable for too many women as well.
Okay, in which case I think we get...
Do I start bringing this to a close, please?
Okay, I think just one final thing, which is that in which case we get to a really interesting argument about what parts of womanhood can be demarcated to the social and what kinds of womanhood can be demarcated to the biological. So, for example, my anatomy is demarcated to the biological, but the fact that I might potentially be a better nurturer than a man, I would demarcate that to the social, you might demarcate that to the biological, in which case we have differing moral scales of value. I would ask why we should necessarily prioritize your moral scale of value, which prioritizes things like the birth rate, when in actual fact there are various other moral scales of value. And if you yourself are a free market American, why is it the case that you would not...
And it's an honor. Can I give you a sign name? That's a huge thing to be accepted in the deaf community. So will you copy me right now? Can you copy my signs? Yeah. Do you see the C and then K, right? So C, K, right there, C, K. It's about your distinctive facial features. That's what we do. C, K, C, K. Everybody, copy. C, K. There we go. Yay!
Thank you. That's very...
Okay. So for the people who do not understand, that is a deaf man. This is in my town. I was watching this. I'm a coda, so my parents are deaf. I know ASL. I was watching this. My jaw dropped at the end, okay? So he's telling him to do a sign name. C, K. He's telling him to go up to his nose. C, I think it was K. Something like that. He got the entire crowd to do it with him. He even got Charlie Kirk to do it with him. What Charlie Kirk and the entire crowd does not know is the sign for... This is the sign for that. He told him it was for his facial features. Okay, I need to stop, but... CK